So Exponential Growth, episode 11. We're with Eric Leininger with PatentDive and here in New Orleans. And thank you, Eric, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to be talking, as always, about personal and business growth. And Eric, let's go ahead and chat about PatentDive and what is it that you guys do?
So what we do is we try and actually we write software to help people get patents more easily. And this includes education and some of the interface that allows people to disclose their information and then hook up at the end with an attorney and then greatly sort of speed up that process, which is a little bit scary and a little bit painful for a lot of people.
Okay. And you guys are, 3 years now?
Yep, about 3 years.
3 years now, and it's basically a platform where people can just go patentdive.com. And I know you mentioned we actually met at the pitch night where you guys presented the business project, but take us maybe some years back and how do you guys, I know your business partners that I talked to, which I got you guys confused a minute ago, Mitchell and Eric, and he was talking like a couple years ago when you guys started working on the project. Apparently you have a lot of experience in patents. So take us back some years and how do you got into the idea on building this platform?
Sure. So my background is that I have a PhD in neuroscience from Tulane University, but I've always been one of these idea guys who carries around like a notebook and is like scrambling down random ideas as they walk down the street and things like that. And part of when I was at a postdoc in my lab, I just got up some volition and was like, well, I really want to try this. And I went and with my brother who worked with this company, we went and filed an idea and it was, pretty expensive and all that sort of stuff. And so what I did is I went and took the patent bar, which is a test that both attorneys and non-attorneys can take in order to practice patent law. Okay. And the reason they have this is because a lot of times a person who is an expert in a particular field is going to be very good at preparing a patent in that particular field. And so the patent office makes it so that people who are non-attorneys can prepare patent applications for other people. And so that's what a patent agent is. And so what I did is I started this small business. And when I did it and I started taking clients, I noticed there's a lot of things that were really slow in preparing patent applications. And I was a programmer, so I sort of came up with some clever stuff. I met Mitch, our founder, when he had trouble at a conference when he was trying to prepare a patent. So he came to me, and I got him something back overnight. And he was sort of like, whoa, that's crazy, right? So from that, slowly sort of transitioned. He was with another company at the time, but since now he's come over to this company. And that's sort of how PatentDive got started.
So from a PhD to starting kind of like a consulting gig, which is the small business. Now, why starting a startup on going that route and raising capital and having the whole full-blown type of startup thing?
I think that's sort of an inherent thing in people, right? So this is not the first business I've ever started. The first business I started when I was like in my early 20s. And, I ran
What was it?
I was actually a painting company. So it was one of these summer painting company type things. Nice. But it's pretty weird to be like, 21 or 22 years old and you're sort of hiring your peers and running around doing sales and all that sort of stuff. And so I've had some experience with that. I think entrepreneurs in general are pretty impatient people, and I'm one of them. You're always just like, well, why don't we just do this? And then it just sort of evolves from there, I think, typically. So.
21 years old, you started that first business on the side, but that's a good point that we talk a lot with young entrepreneurs. I'm 26 years old, and it's always good to know that it's never a linear path. You didn't know at 21 that you were going to be doing this. How old are you now?
41.
Okay, so 41, 20-something years after that, here you are on the startup and building teams and doing this. So you have no idea about this.
No, it's like when I first started this out, I had no idea what a stock option was, and I had no idea what equity was and those sorts of things. And now I, of course, know all that. And I'll tell you what, it's exciting. I think that people, at least entrepreneurs we meet, because we meet a lot of them, they like the excitement. They like the chaos and the excitement, and that's almost a reward itself in a lot of cases. And probably in that category, if I was a PhD scientist and was like, hey, well, why don't I try and do some of my own stuff? So
I want to touch on that. I know we see a whole lot of entrepreneurs in this new culture, Silicon Valley, where education is kind of like completely different from the startup world, but now you kind of like went through that path as well. You went through the academia and you still came to the other side. So do you see any advantage of going through that, or?
I would say this, as a scientist, as a trained scientist, that I think there's this paradigm called lean startup, which is basically what they're saying is don't trust what you think and get data to support your business moves. So we pretty much adhere to that pretty strongly here, and that all science tells you that it's not real until the statistics tell you it's real. So no matter what your business plan is or what your goals are, if the data doesn't support that, then you got to move. You got to shift. And so I think what we try and do a lot is come up with the best experiments as quickly as possible, and then just try and iterate as quickly as possible to see what direction we can go.
Yeah, we touch with the 5M, the model, business model, money, how you guys make money, market, mentorship, and management of the show. So let's get started with the business model. And since you were talking about pivoting and changing, did you guys initially have a business model, and did you guys now change to something else, or where are you guys in regards to business model?
Well, it's interesting because we come out with sort of patent software per se. There's not a lot of it out there, and most of it is targeted towards attorneys. And what we're trying to do is actually hook up with the new generation of inventors, which are these people who are going to prototype stores and maker shops and things like that. And a lot of them, rightfully so, are sort of worried when they come into these shops that, hey, is this person going to take my idea and that sort of thing. And it seems like it's a little overwrought, but really I think that's a reflection of you're getting into something that you just don't know, right? That sort of fear that's part of it. And patent and intellectual property is a big part of getting rid of that fear so that you can move forward really fast. Because what patents do is say, the second that I publicly disclose this and I have a patent, I'm covered. It doesn't matter if I talk to whoever because I filed this patent and I'm protected for what I'm inventing. So it really makes the business process go a lot faster. And so our business model is really to hook up with those people and then help them with their intellectual property. So, and I don't think there's a lot out there that tried to do that before. So some of it's iterative and some of it we're sort of leeching off of other business models.
If you guys are listening out there and you have some sort of concern about your idea, you just jump into PatentDive.com. Is that right? Is that the best way?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. I think you can really tell that you have a good idea when you're worried about who to tell. And that's really because you're like, because you're excited.
Yeah.
Honestly, you're excited about it. And the first step is to find someone you trust and talk about it. And a lot of these are in the prototype stores. And then you can come to PatentDive.com as well.
And there's a lot of education going on. You mentioned that's huge in your business right now, just being able to educate the new generation of entrepreneurs on patents and everything related to that, right?
Yeah, so we're actually funded by the National Science Foundation for what I believe is the first National Science Foundation STTR grant in Louisiana. And that's with education with Xavier University. And basically, we're sort of tasked with trying to gamify patent law to some extent. And that's a tough task because patent law is not that fun. But we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. And there's really certain things that if you can learn, you can really put yourself pretty far ahead of the curve pretty quickly for entrepreneurs. And so in our app, we have education that pops up and all that sort of stuff.
Are you guys using some assistant tools, or you guys are building some tools for that education inside of it? I know there's a couple like, from Intercom where you got this communication going with your user clients, or there's a bunch of other walkthroughs type of software. Or
we use Intercom. And so that's sort of how we can talk to people if they have questions and things like that. We also have our own sort of education platform, which is API based. A lot of our software is pretty stacked at the API level. So we really we actually have a bunch of apps and they all sort of talk to each other. So it comes in through there, and it's sort of something we created ourselves.
Yeah, we love definitely. We're huge fans into Slack and all of that, and every single interaction that we can have in Slack, we just add it. So that's the business model. Then market, you touch base on that network. At the Baton Rouge pitch now, you were talking about this networks of 3D shops. And when we think about patents, we think about maybe the software guy that came up with this great idea. But also you have products, real tangible products that you solely on a weekend went ahead and printed out the shop, and you want to protect that idea or whatever. So what about that?
No, it's really interesting. I mean, I think this is the first time in history where you can literally have an idea and then to bring it to life in a weekend, right? And I think that we're trying to answer that need, but I mean, we're there for that guy, but it's all new to us too, right? And so 3D printing is new to a lot of people who are using it. Protecting 3D printing is also very new to us as well. As far as we know, we're one of the first people out there to get into this space. But yeah, I mean, we meet so many entrepreneurs and innovators, and it's awesome to see them, the creativity that they come up with.
So if you will mention the top 2 or 3 type of clients for PatentDive as a platform, who do you think will be those top 2 or 3 clients?
We're concentrating sort of on scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs in that space. And what we're really trying to do is get someone who is actually tangentially familiar with patents and knows the pain of doing patents. Because once you sort of use our stuff, it becomes a lot less mystical. So that's sort of who we're targeting.
Money is the big question. How do you guys make money or revenue? How you bring revenue to the company?
We just charge on a per application basis. So we charge typically a lot cheaper than going to an attorney's office for design patents. So this is our app right now is for design patents. What design patents are is they protect the shape of something. And all 3D models are basically shapes. And it's a good way to protect it. So what we do is just leverage those 3D models to be used to create the drawings in the app. And then we hook them up with an attorney on the back end. And then they can begin to go from there and just go. And so we just charge on a per application basis, and it ends up being about half or a little bit more than half as cheap.
Do you charge that up front, or is it once the process is completed and the whole patent goes through? Or
no, just up front.
Yes.
So there's a preparation fee. Typically, that's pretty normal in this industry, where there's a fee just for preparing a patent application, and then there are actually subsequent fees when you prosecute it at the patent office, and that's just sort of standard with how these things work.
Yep, wonderful. And then, so we covered pretty much the first 3 M's, and I wanted just to expand on the patent itself. Somebody that never heard this, especially international. I'm not from here, from the U.S. as well, but I got a good friend of mine. He came up with this great idea. I don't know if you heard about it in Baton Rouge. It was a stun gun case for iPhone case. So it was kind of like a taser, but on your iPhone. And they actually went through the whole patent path, and they got it approved. So I don't know anything about patent, but I thought it was awesome, and kudos to him. I mean, they just knock it out of the park with that idea. But if you can summarize the basics of patents and the different type of patents out there and what we should be looking to learn more about.
Sure. So first thing as an entrepreneur you need to know is that patents come from sort of early 14th century Italy or something like that. And it's really a response to the fact that you've created something, you're bringing it to market, and it's successful, and you don't want someone to knock it off, right? And so what happens is they would keep all these formulas of how they make particular things. I think it was glass makers where they first started this off. But what happened is that people would die, right? And then you would lose that information. The governments would lose information of that cool stuff, right? And if you don't have a mechanism to bring things into the world as a government, you're going to lose. The economies are going to lose a lot. Right? And so the deal that they make is sort of, hey, just tell us what your thing is, and if it's novel, we'll protect you when you bring it out to the marketplace. And that's sort of the contract that an entrepreneur or an innovator has with the government, right? So that being said, the government is really interested in getting you to disclose what you've done. And as an entrepreneur, when you have a good idea, you really want to try and get some intellectual property within 1 year typically, and keep it confidential as possible with who you talk to, because once you've disclosed it, and that one, at least in the U.S., once you've disclosed it and a year has passed, then you can actually invalidate your patent at that point because you've disclosed it to the public, and the government at that point does not care. So it's not really a reward for innovation. I mean, people typically create because they're super lazy, and they're like, hey, I really like to make this a lot easier because it stinks, right? But it really is about getting what's in your head out to the world. So that's one of the first things that I would say is pretty important for entrepreneurs to understand. So types of patents that are out there are utility patents and design patents. Utility patents cover function, which is it's the iPhone, for example, would be something that's really cool with a computer screen that calls, and you're actually protecting the idea of a phone with a computer screen that calls people. A design patent is the shape of the iPhone with the rounded corners and things like that. And so one of these just protects the shape, and one protects the function. Right? So those are just basically the two types of patents. So that I guess that's important because a lot of people don't know what to do when they first start off. They're like, I have no idea what. I mean, it's right confusing off the bat. There's more than one type of patent, right? And they're like, well, which one is mine? And then they typically would shut down when you begin to say utility or design, and they're like, oh, this is so confusing and things like that, right? So we try and sort of move people through our app at sort of a level of trying to teach them while they're going through that process, right? So they can make good decisions. So the whole process is you come in, you get your idea, you do a search to see whether or not it's been done before, and then you prepare your patent, you file it. The second that you file it is the day you are protected if you get the patent. So that means that I can file it today, and tomorrow stand up with a megaphone at the New Orleans Superdome and tell every single person my thing, and I will be protected, presuming that my patent was prepared properly. And that's what it's for.
Is that what they call patent pending? Or what about the year that you're talking about? What about that time frame?
Yeah, so that year actually starts when you talk, and it's really used, that's really before your filing date.
Okay, got it. Right.
And so that's really just saying, like, hey, be aware of it before you file. Find evidence of that, or your attorney, you're not supposed to file a patent if you do that, right?
But then after that, you say the next day, you file today, and the next day you can publicly announce whatever you want.
Well, I don't think it's a good idea, right?
Right.
But in theory, that's what patents allow you to do, right? And it's like you want to go to the big toy manufacturer and try and get a license for it, right? It's not really a good idea to do that if you don't have a patent filed, right? And there's certainly people who get knocked off. There are certainly businesses whose mode of operation is to hope that their resources outlast your resources. So you file your patent, and then you actually wait, and you usually have a representative, and the patent office will come back to you in about a year, I think right now is really where they're tracking, and they say, did you get the patent or not get the patent? And it's really not as black and white as do you get the patent or not get the patent. It's really an arbitration a lot of times. So if the patent office, they do a search, and if they find the exact same thing, a lot of times you're sort of screwed, right? But if they don't, there's this thing called obviousness, which really means like you can take two different things, right, and mash them together and then create your thing, right? And it seems sort of unfair that that's like out there, right? But it actually, I don't know if this is what it's meant to do, but what it prevents is people randomly leafing through a giant thing of patents and saying, okay, patent this and patent this, now give me my patent, right? And so typically you can get rejected on an obviousness rejection, but then whoever your representative argues back and forth like a court, right? And so it really becomes an arbitration at that point. And this is what attorneys are excellent at, is just sort of interacting with the examiner, sort of like being in front of a judge and trying to get as much intellectual property for you as possible. And that's why we partner with them, because we concentrate on the prep part of it, but we really want all our people that go with us to be very, very successful, obviously.
Phenomenal. And I think it's a good point, just a good reminder for you guys that getting started companies, either engineers, scientists, or entrepreneurs out there, that you come to a platform, a group of people, specialists like Eric and his team, just to get the project off the ground. And then after that, you definitely want to build a team, and they can help you out connect with those legal experts. But at the beginning, you can rest assured that you can have that education accelerated through the platform like PatentDive we're talking about right here. Now, switching gears a little bit before we take over and Craig goes into the mentorship and management. And I want to just talk about personal growth, completely change gears and personal growth. And if you have to think about, as a scientist in the past 20 years, what's something that you can think of that produce exponential growth? So we talk about exponential as the compound interest that every year is more and more. So can you think of something that allow you to grow exponentially in your personal life?
Well, in my personal life, it's exponential growth in my own personal life. I think is exponential growth itself is sort of a function of knowing a lot of different things and not sort of playing in a bunch of areas, seeing how the parts fit together, and that those parts themselves actually end up sort of forming a positive feedback loop, right? And there's a lot of Ray Kurzweil type stuff, and it's about exponential growth and things like that in technology. Yeah. But that's really what it is. I mean, exponential growth is something where there's sort of a positive feedback loop on concepts that produce more than the combination of their parts. So in my own life, I would say that it's just I'm a scientist, and also now I've been CEO and things like that. And it's really seeing all these spectrums and how they fit together that allows you to rapidly build things with sort of concepts you sort of put together.
Yeah. Now, on a very similar note, and this will be my last question, in regards to business, is there something that you guys have identified that you say, hey, this is definitely something that is allowing us to grow, and now we can grow exponentially because of this element or a series of elements maybe?
That's a really good question. And I think that that's certainly the goal of any investor to identify is the companies that are ready to scale, right? And even what I tell my own inventors when they come out of here is that that's a data-dependent situation. And what it means is that you go and take your product and you build 50 of them or something like that. You choose a small portion of your market and you show you can generate a profit, right? And that point, you become scalable to the function of how many of those tiny markets exist out there, right? So to the point where you can actually scale and do things like that, it's just flat out experimentation. Like you need to go out and get the data and make the numbers work. And once you make the numbers work, then most investors I know will pump a ton of cash right to you because they have an almost guaranteed return. And that's really what they're looking for.
Phenomenal. Eric, it's been a pleasure. Where can people go find you?
Just PatentDive.com. Just go there and we have a utility, and we're actually running a utility pilot program right now for one of our new products coming up. And we have a design patent product, and you can contact us through there.
Thank you. Craig LeBlanc is now going to take over the next segment.
Eric, I just have a few follow-up questions from Gabriel's portion, but how long has PatentDive been around?
About 3 years.
And if you were recommending just a price range for a young entrepreneur, say, hey, you want to kind of put this rough amount aside to handle this portion of your business, what would you kind of recommend for that?
For intellectual property?
Right.
So right now, I think it's really smart when you're starting out a business to apply for intellectual property at least. I don't think money barriers in the very, very beginning, especially if you're doing something called a provisional patent, which is sort of like getting a ticket at the deli counter. You can do those pretty quick and cheap. I don't think that's the biggest barrier. It's just sort of the weird hassle of dealing with it, right? But if you want to go down the patent route, typically it takes from like 8 to 10 grand in the existing paradigm. And there are a lot of attorneys out there that can get your business started and all that sort of stuff. We try and do is obviously bring that cost down through use of software and efficiencies and things like that. And then we partner with attorneys who are happy to have that work done for them. And so they'll bring down their fees because they've saved a lot of money, and they have the potential of having a very successful client in the future that they may have otherwise not got because it's too expensive or it's too scary or something like that.
So any kind of design patent, if you say just put 10 grand aside and we should be able to at least cover that component, is that sufficient, or are you thinking a little bit more?
For design patents, no. So we actually charge $500 for a design patent, and then there's the representative fees on top of that, and that'll cost you several $100s. This is for a design patent. If it's something you want to build or manufacture and bring to market or something like that, I mean, you're going to end up spending 30 grand or 40 grand building it anyway. That's a pretty minimal cost.
Right.
That's a pretty good investment in my mind.
Okay, and then a management question I had, it seems like this new environment of startups has just a high level of personal freedom for founders, for employees, with Slack, remote workforce, outsourcing and offshoring. How do you manage that as an entrepreneur? This kind of
me personally, it's not that easy. I'm pretty much like, let's figure it out type of mode. And so like one thing I found in my own company is that you have this balance between this sort of structured environment where you have very clear expectations of here are your things that you have to do. And you have to balance that with actually the feedback that you get from the market. And so one thing you could sort of build a debt on, is sort of a management debt, is setting up expectations and shifting the systems if the systems don't actually lead to things that work. So me personally, we're always sort of struggling with that balance between structure and flexibility. I think one way to do it is to actually give people the freedom to work from home and things like that, because they're in their own environment. They feel productive in their own environment and things like that. And then when it comes to meetings and things like that, we can meet here and do that sort of thing. But I do think that that's a real challenge of a startup. And I can definitely see as you get bigger and it gets clearer, the list of things to do, that it becomes very structured. But I imagine that may be one of the things in startups that's challenging for everyone. I don't know.
And how do you manage your own personal life when a lot of these startups are so demanding on any type of relationship or any type of health that some entrepreneurs will just go off the deep end trying to keep this ship afloat? And this personal freedom really makes it even worse, because it's not like you clock out. It's almost you could be on the clock 24/7 along with your workforce. How do you help balance that?
Well, I think that just comes down to the personality of an entrepreneur. Like, it doesn't bother me personally. It's one of these things where I think entrepreneurs are almost in love with chaos, even the successful ones. They love the fact that they can go out and not know what's going to happen. And there are very few people who do that and feel comfortable in that realm. But I think it's necessary, because you really have to go out and say, okay, what's next? You're constantly saying what's next. And in that question is, new data, which causes change. So I like it. So and most of the entrepreneurs I know really like it too. But translating that into what works for everyone in your company, that's some of the challenges I think for some people.
And a lot of entrepreneurs, they get into business and maybe they try, maybe they think that they are everything that business needs. But at some point you come face to face with your weaknesses as a person, business, and that you need help with. What were some of the things that you had to say, I lean on one of my co-founders for this strength in the business because it's something I don't have? And what was the process, just recognizing that and then going find somebody to do that, just identifying your weaknesses and then finding people that can do that for you in your company?
That's a really, really good question. And I don't think there's any recognition that happens, at least for me. It's been really saying, like, I struggled so hard that you sort of reach a point where you're like, hey, wow, that person does it a lot easier than me and isn't struggling. That's amazing, right? And so we should totally hire that person and then make everyone's life easier, right? And I think everyone likes to think that they're like capable of accounting and also capable of sales and development, and everyone has that thing, right? But really, team building is about, and I'm not saying I'm the best team builder or anything like that, but I think team building is about finding things that you can't do and saying like, I'm so glad that I have someone who has these skills that I don't have, because it allows me to focus on what I'm good at. I think there's a lot, it's weird in a startup because I think there's a lot of crossover between what people are good at, what they think they're good at, and also what they and how they interact with each other. And it's very good in the beginning because you have a lot of players, and as you grow, people become more specialized and things like that. But, I feel very, very lucky for the team that we have, and it's very much, it's a team of specialists. You literally have people who are just tremendously, tremendously talented in these specific portions, and that's hopefully what a good team is. It's sort of like, back in the day they had Voltron, which is like this, a transformer made from other transformers, right? And I think that's hopefully what you're trying to get with a startup. So.
It maybe gives an example of a skill set that you were just beating you up, and so you found a team member and how that whole process went.
Sure. Marketing, design, finances, back-end serious development. I'll just go off the job descriptions of people that I work with. And then front-end design. I mean, all of these people do way better than I do, even business forecasting and planning.
And what are some of when you're looking for somebody to fill a role that you're not good at, how do you vet them, or what do you look for in that person, or just as an employee in general?
I think at this stage, what you're hopefully looking for is someone who can sort of handle a little bit of the ambiguity that comes in a startup and also just has skills. I think skills are invaluable. Education can be learned to some extent, but there are some people out there just have inherent skills and they wow you. And you're like, wow, we don't have anyone else that can do that on our team. And those are the people that really, in my mind, can grow your company because they create whole productive realms inside your company. And so I love it when I interact with people and find things like that.
So tell us about one of your greatest fears you have in business, as far as, is the feel of failure, I feel we're going to drop the ball here. What are some of those things?
My greatest fears in business, just I think disappointing the people that have invested in our company, that believed in what we're doing. It's tough to convince people to follow your vision and things like that. I mean, our investors, I love our investors. They believe in what we're doing, and we haven't had like a down round yet or anything like that, but I know it would putatively kill me to go in there and be like, hey, now we have to sell at a lower share price or something like that. And because to me, they've invested in me, right? And in this company. And so that would be very disappointing for me, I think.
How many founders has it been?
We have 3 total founders.
So y'all started from the beginning, 3 guys. Tell me about some of those rounds of investments that y'all have raised getting started up. Y'all had like a friends and family and then like a seed round, or where are you at right now?
We've just done various raises, mostly friends and family type stuff. We've raised about $500,000 doing that over the course of a couple of years. We just went full time about this time last year. It's been very iterative, and it's based on events. And we've had some valuation raises and things like that, but it's mostly, I think we're getting to the point now where we're heading towards things other than friends and family, because we have something we can push out to market and stuff like that. But yeah. So,
are you looking to raise capital now or for anything in the future?
We're always looking for capital.
What are y'all looking for right now as far as just capital funding?
Well, I think we're headed towards sort of a Series A type thing.
Have y'all set an amount for that yet?
No, we haven't done that yet. And so we're like everything, we're gathering data in order, because of all the venture capital people we talk to and all things like that, one of the most important decisions, or the most information that they think is very important in making their decisions, is actually happy customers. So if they make a lot of their decisions based off of calling your customers and being like, how much do you enjoy this product? And then they invest based on that. So that's what we're really concentrating on right now.
Do y'all have any idea if it's going to land maybe in $1 million, $2 million range in minimum investment, or what's a good investor for y'all?
That's a good question. I think right now we are sort of trying to keep this sort of in-house. I think maybe I've known some other people who've gone out of the gate and getting a lot of money, and it ends up you give away a significant portion of your company doing that. But we really want to time it almost exactly with the scaling component. I think that that's really important. So I don't have a number per se.
Now, where do you get a lot of this entrepreneurial acumen from? Is it just books or reading, or do you have any influencers in your life that you kind of lean on?
Some of it is sort of painful experience, and a lot of it is actually
hard nuts.
Yeah, no, totally. There's nothing worse than like having disappointed customers and things like that. Even some previous businesses, it's always management's always a hard thing. But there are some great angel investors in our own group. One in particular, James Griffith out of Hammond. He's very good at sort of coaching us, or coaching me in particular, through this process, and he's been very supportive of us and things like that. And of course, we've met with a lot of other successful entrepreneurs in town, and we're always getting advice from people, whoever we can.
And before I jump into mentors, you said something about happy customers and getting customer feedback. We always hear about how critical that is to have your customers vet you. That is the market validating your product. Tell us about what you've learned from your customers.
Everything. When we come in and so we have products, and when they use our stuff, we almost entirely base what we do based on that feedback.
How do you get that feedback? What are you asking them questions? Or you engage them after you deliver the product? What was your experience?
We run sort of pilot programs before we ship our code, obviously, right? And like even we have a product we'll be releasing soon, but all of what's being done to get that feedback is internal, obviously. So we do a lot of sort of testing of those particular types of things, and we just see. You can just tell, obviously, sometimes what works and what doesn't. And when the process is over and they sort of are left at the same level that they started with, then I think that you're headed in the right direction for sure. And so that's what we're always constantly trying to say. Okay, here's what we're aiming for. Let's see if we can make it. Right. So that's sort of how we do with our customers.
Is there one? Maybe if you could just highlight one customer feedback that just was pivotal for y'all, or
one is, I'll say, an average customer, or not an average customer, a local inventor. And then we have feedback from attorneys. And then we actually went to the patent office, and I presented to them a couple times about what we're doing. And they've been very much like, wow, that's amazing, and all that sort of stuff, right? And so that's really good feedback, but actually doesn't help you guide in that particular direction. But for our inventors, the feedback that really helps is that they've learned a lot about patents during the process. And that I always ask them at the end, how much of this do you think that you could do yourself after working with our software? Because this is one of the things that we're targeting with our upcoming products is really, how can you have this idea in your head and you want it to come true? Can you trust yourself enough to do it, to try and do it? And we're trying to get to that point. And so I said, how much do you think you could do yourself? And they give us numbers like 70% and 80% and things like that. And so that's the feedback we want to get that up to like 100%. And that would be great.
So we'll dive into mentors in your life. You had mentioned James and other people from investors. Tell us about any kind of background of people that have been influential in your life. Maybe even start with this person as a young man maybe influenced me to just an entrepreneurship in general. Was there anyone like that?
Probably one of the biggest influences is actually my dad. And my dad's a small business owner growing up. And
what did he do?
He was a cabinet maker. And what he did, like the thing that he taught me, which was very interesting, is that you'll figure it out when you get there. And that sort of thing, that idea that it's okay if you don't have all the answers, because you're going to get a lot more variables about how to solve them if you just go there in the first place. And that's, I think, very vital as sort of a jump-in type philosophy for an entrepreneur. Like you can't, at one point, it doesn't matter how much data you got to get. You got to jump in and do it, right? And that's a really valuable thing to learn. So I feel very fortunate for that. And then just mentorship. I got a lot of great mentorship at Tulane University. I have a great professor there, Ken Minioka, who taught me a lot about how good science is done, and that was very valuable to me. And then clearly the local entrepreneur community. Corey Tisdale is one who's helped us give us some advice. James Griffith, met with a bunch of different people around here. Mark Lewis is another one who's helped us out. I feel very fortunate for all this.
One thing one of my mentors taught me is that wisdom is knowledge applied over time. And I think a great quote out of this podcast comes from Eric's father. I think every entrepreneur should know that you will figure it out when you get there. It's a quote of wisdom that you learn after beating your head against a business for a long time. Don't expect to know everything before you jump. You're going to figure it out when you get there. So that was good. How valuable were those, which you just kind of said that a little bit, maybe go a little deeper into the value that it has both in forming you and making the right decisions. How valuable are those mentorship connections when you're going through this whole business process?
Well, this business process is like anytime you're going into something you completely don't understand, like what do you do, right? It's like a real weird and scary type thing. And our mentors, like they allow us to call and ask them like, all right, we're at this stage. We think we're going to be billionaires. And he's like, not yet. And you're like, oh no, what? What are you talking about, right? And it's like, it just goes, they've been there. They've been successful, right? And so they know a lot of the things that you can trip up on. Now, entrepreneurs are very typically bullheaded, and they're just going to go ahead and do it anyway until they sort of screw up somewhere. But when you screw up, do you have someone that you can talk to and try and figure that out, right? And that's so valuable when you're going into any new territory, right? And it's one of those things where I don't think you can sort of read online and figure that out. You need someone to have both the emotional component and the knowledge, the supportive component. That's from a very high level. I mean, we're trying to grow our business and all that sort of stuff. Like these people have built $100 million businesses and things like that, right? I have no idea what that's like, right? So it's important to try and get their perspective, and hopefully it'll help us out as we get closer to that. So.
Yeah, that was a great piece. Definitely re-listen to that part. Well, Eric, thank you so much for your time and the story of PatentDive, and we'll definitely keep our eyes on you. Do this again as you get further down the road.
Awesome, dude. Thanks, man.